cost more to people going in, but you guys can use public transport. You know, there's the subway, the buses. Isn't that the answer?
Well, good question, but the problem is Staten Island doesn't have a subway. Staten Island is the only borough that doesn't have a subway. The other boroughs have at least one, often several. We have one train line that goes from one end of Staten Island to the other. So we're not integrated with the rest of the city mass transit system. And like we said, over the years, for the last several decades, the MTA has had every opportunity to do something to improve mass transit options for the people of Staten Island, and they have not done so to a large extent.
But a lot of what they say about this, what I've heard, is they're saying, well, this whole congestion thing will give us the money to be able to do things like you're talking about, to improve the mass transit system, to improve public transport, which would help Staten Island.
You know, that's just a judgment. I don't see it happening at any time in my lifetime, frankly. Because we've been hearing things like that. I'm approaching 60 years old. I've been hearing things like that for much of my adult life. I just don't see it happening. Granted, they will take this money and use it in other parts of the city, and they will probably make improvements there. I'm not denying that, because they have to do something with the money. But I'm speaking as a Staten Island elected official who represents 500,000 people who lack adequate mass transit options, and saying, why should we pay? Not to mention that they intentionally will increase air pollution for the people of Staten Island with this plan.
But why would they want to increase air pollution problems for you guys? What sense would that make?
So the MTA had to do a study. The federal government required them to do a study and analyze the impact of 6 different toxic pollutants, and to simulate what those increases or decreases would be in year 1, which would be, say, 2025, and year 2045. So they had to mark it out for the next 21 years. And in each of those categories, those 6 pollutants, the MTA's own study said because traffic will increase on Staten Island as a result of congestion pricing, that those pollutants will get worse in year 1 and get progressively worse over the next 21 years. That's their own study.
Would it be a good idea then for Staten Island to have its own congestion charge to stop cars coming into Staten Island?
I have floated that idea myself, because if this was all about congestion and reducing the cars, or at least, you know, getting a pot of money somewhere, Staten Island, like as we speak, the Staten Island Expressway, I'm sure, is a mini parking lot. And if they were concerned about congestion across the region, they would do this across. So I have floated that idea, but it hasn't gone too far.
But they've got to do something, haven't they, about say, Manhattan, because it is, you know, it's jammed. I've been there. I've seen what it's like. What's the answer? If you don't have congestion charges, how else are you going to keep the cars out?
That's a fair point. And this, as you know, in England has been debated and implemented for decades now, right? And we are concerned that once it gets implemented here, it may help in the central business district, but, you know, we represent people too. We represent firemen and teachers who have to get to work and they don't have any options. And because the MTA has failed to properly provide mass transit options for the people of Staten Island, they have to drive their car to work because they don't have an option. And that's why they'll be penalized even more so. Just imagine if the other 4 boroughs only had one subway line. Or just imagine if the Metro North, which is a commuter railroad, stopped at the Manhattan border. Or if the Long Island Railroad stopped in Queens, let's say, or Brooklyn or Manhattan, and didn't come into the central business district. What would people do? They would have to drive to work. But since we don't have an option on Staten Island, we are left with really no choice but to drive. And it will punish and hurt those people who just want to get to work.
Vito Fossella there. Well, Diane, your town, what do you reckon?
I love how you were questioning the Staten Island borough president. Look, I think of that old Churchill saying, was it, relation to this, Americans will eventually do the right thing, but only after they've exhausted all other possibilities. This is, I mean, for half a century, we've had cities doing congestion pricing. If you want to, you know, fly home during Christmas, you pay more. I mean, this will encourage people to use the subways. It will give the city revenue to invest in more bike lanes. I mean, it's net a good. And I'm sitting here reading about the successes of London and other places. To me, it's just a no-brainer, and I recall this happening during Bloomberg, etc. It's time to do it, and most people support it.
I'm guessing you don't live in Staten Island.
I do not know. I live in Jersey City, so I should be gnashing my teeth. But you know what? Is it my right to drive as a single car into downtown Manhattan during rush hour? No, it's not. Of all the many rights I have, I don't think that one's sacrosanct.
All right, well, let's turn the focus to somewhere that has a congestion system, if I'm right, Simon, which is Singapore. How does it work there?
So, you know, we've had it a long time, and every vehicle, every car and every motorcycle has to have an in or on-vehicle unit fitted to it with a prepaid card, and there are gantries all over Singapore. You get charged as you go through gantries. You know, highways cost more, going to the city centre costs more, and because the system is centrally monitored, when there's congestion, they can up the costs of going in one direction, lower the costs of going in another to control the traffic. And if you're following on your you know, WhatsApp on your app in the car, you'll know which way to go. I mean, I think general, yeah. I mean, but this only makes sense in the context of a sensible overall transport policy. So you have to, if you're going to force people to get out of their cars because it costs more money, to price them off the road, in effect, you really do need to provide good public transport alternatives. So you need really good subways and buses. You also need things like cycle routes. To some extent, London's done that. Singapore's ahead of the game in that. But the public service infrastructure has to precede the tolling. Otherwise, you're creating discomfort and unpleasantness. You know,
and concern, like we heard from Vito. But in Singapore, then, the public transport system is pretty good, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday, I gave up my car. I mean, another issue is the cost of car. I mean, even the smallest car in Singapore would cost you, given the inclusion to see, about $300,000, about $200,000 US for the smallest car. So, you know, you cost a lot of money to buy a car. So, you know, I ride an electric bike made in Germany. Yesterday I took the bus, I took the subway, and in the morning I went out on my bike. So, public transport is very good here. The buses are primarily electric or hybrid anyway. And it's not too costly either. I mean, of course, it does rain rather heavily.
Well, so yes, and all those alligators, of course, or crocodiles, whatever they are.
Crocodiles, wrong continent. These are crocodiles.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Well, look, if you met one and you misnamed it, I mean,
that would just be a disaster. Well, you know, accuracy is what I'm trained in, as you know, Simon, in most ways. But all right, let me come back to you finally on that point, which Simon was making, which is that there's no good having things like the congestion charge if you don't have the public transport system that can replace that need to drive around. And one of the points that Vito was making was it just doesn't exist.
That's not true. I've been to Staten Island. There's a Staten Island Railway. There's a local bus. There's express bus. There's the famous Staten Island ferry. And you know what? With money comes more investment. And the New York City has one of the most extensive subway systems in the world. Staten Island perhaps could be better served, but there's no better incentive than to not have an incentive to get in your car and drive into Manhattan to go to work.
Right. Well,
do I sound hard on that?
Well, you're sounding suitably tough and forensic, I would say, which is exactly the qualities, of course, that your boss would expect from you.
Yes.
No question about that. And there's a coincidence. Who do we have? Well, let me explain. Fortune is one of the big global business magazines, famous, of course, for the Fortune 500 primarily. And for the first time in its 95-year history, it now has a woman, a CEO, Anastasia Nikovskaya. As Nikovskaya has been the chief financial officer and chief strategy officer since 2019. I'm very pleased to say she joins us now. Anastasia, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Delighted to have you here on Business Matters. And, well, let me ask you first. I mean, it is quite a thing that an organisation like Fortune, very famous magazine, it's taken it 95 years to get a woman CEO. Why so long?
I don't know why so long, but this is such an incredible moment for me personally and for Fortune overall. Absolutely incredible moment.
Now, I know by your accent, by your name, I think you were born just near Moscow, in fact, if my research is correct. So you're someone who, you know, bestrides the world in that sense. What do you think of Fortune as a magazine, very much a Western American magazine? What do you think is its purpose? What do you think is its role in the world as well as America?
Fortune's mission is to change the world by making business better. And it sounds like a lot of big words, but in reality, what it really means is that we pride ourselves on providing trusted information and storytelling. And we also build world-class communities and many famous franchises. MPW, Most Powerful Women, have been in business for 25 years. This year is the 26th year. CEOs, various communities. So that's what it is. And for me personally, you know, I've traveled the world quite a lot, and I do call New York home, but this fascination with media and fascination with free press has been always in my heart, even when I was a teenager, just because of, given the environment I have been growing up, it was quite fascinating to really learn and know what it really means. So in a way, I feel like I'm living the dream a little bit.
Well, indeed. I mean, just take us back, if you would, to that, because it's very interesting. Not many CEOs of major US companies were born in, well, I guess, was it the Soviet Union when you were born there?
Indeed it was.
And what, you know, how did you come then to be where you are now? Just take us a little way through that. And what was it like, first of all, growing up in the Soviet Union at that time?
I had the most normal childhood, the way how I think about it. However, sometimes when I talk about it, it now feels that maybe I didn't have a normal childhood. My childhood was around incredible, smart people. I lived in a town of scientists, so everybody was a scientist around me, and I thought it's absolutely normal that in your life everybody is a scientist. I would have 2 pairs of shoes per year, one winter and one summer shoe, and I would also think it's absolutely normal growing up like this all your childhood. So that's what it was about. And we read a lot, we did a lot of math, being curious. That's the childhood. And then I moved to the US as part of KPMG, and I used to work for KPMG in Moscow. And my very first encounter with media was at NBC Universal, where I worked for quite some time, for about 6 or 7 years. And that is where I fell in love with media as a business. It's very complex, with a lot of very complex models, so I love it.
Well, I mean, you mentioned or kind of alluded to it early on, your birthplace is not somewhere where particularly free media is even accessible at the moment. Looking back, how do you feel still Russian? What do you feel about your country and where it is?
Oh, that is a complicated question, because I'm extremely proud of the history and the literature and the art and all these wonderful historical things. You know, the current situation is of course a completely different story all around. You know, I'm married to a Ukrainian Jewish man, and you know, and I'm Russian, so, and we coexist together, because the reality is that, you know, for me, I have a lot of relatives, whether it is in Ukraine or in Russia, and it always felt like a family combined, rather than now it's something completely different.
Interesting. Well, I won't embarrass you by asking Diane to ask you a question, but I want to ask Simon. I mean, this is the CEO of a major company involved in business journalism. Simon, what would you like to say or ask, perhaps, of Anastasia?
Well, hi, Anastasia. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
We have a thriving Russian and Ukrainian community here in Singapore. Actually, I have a very good Jewish Ukrainian friend just across from me. I can actually see her flat from here. You know, I'm curious about the way that you feel about the US. How long have you been in the US, and what do you make of it?
So I've been in the US for a long time, since 2001, and what I really love about US and New York in particular is that the ability to see and really get immersed into different cultures and a diversity in all sorts of form of it, right? Doesn't matter what you think about it, the aspect of it, it's truly incredible. So despite many issues that we have in New York City right now, ultimately the fact how incredibly diverse it is what's so attractive.
Well, I won't embarrass you also by asking your thoughts on on congestion charges, because that might
But
be...
yes, you take the Staten Island.
Ask for her opinion on me.
We'll come off air to do that, I think, possibly. Anastasia, thank you so much for being with us. Really good, great privilege to speak to you. Anastasia Nikovskaya, who is, of course,